You are inside the rings of Saturn, and they are nothing like the photographs. From Earth, from telescopes, from every image ever taken by every spacecraft that has ever swung through the outer solar system, Saturn's rings look like a single solid structure. A flat, luminous disk of pearl and gold wrapped around a planet so geometrically perfect it seems designed rather than formed. They look like glass. They look like they have a surface. They look, above all else, like something you could land on, something stable, something that has been exactly where it is for as long as the solar system has existed and will remain there long after you are gone. They are the most recognizable feature of any planet in our solar system. Children draw them. Textbooks open with them. They are the image that, more than any other, communicates the alien beauty of the cosmos to people who will never leave Earth. You have seen them 1,000 times. You thought you knew what they were. You are inside them now, and what they actually are is a debris field moving at 22,000 miles per hour, and a chunk of water ice the size of a house just passed close enough to your hull that the proximity alert is still ringing. The rings of Saturn are not a surface. They are not a structure. They are not, in any meaningful physical sense, a thing. They are a process, a continuous, dynamic, violently active field of particles ranging in size from fine dust grains smaller than a human hair to boulders the size of houses, and in some regions, chunks of ice several meters across, all of them in independent orbit around Saturn, all of them moving at different velocities depending on their distance from the planet, all of them colliding, fragmenting, clumping, and drifting in a system so complex that the Cassini spacecraft, which spent 13 years studying Saturn and made dozens of passes through and between the rings, transmitted data that scientists are still fully processing a decade after the mission ended. The rings look still from a distance the same way a river looks still from an airplane. The stillness is an artifact of scale. Up close, everything is moving, and most of what is moving is capable of ending you without registering the event. But here's the problem. The density of the rings, the number of particles per cubic meter at any given location inside them, varies enormously between regions, and the variations are not marked, not charted well enough for real-time navigation, and not stable. The rings are not a static map you can memorize. They shift. Waves propagate through them, driven by the gravitational influence of Saturn's moons, resonances that create organized structures within the rings, gaps, spirals, clumps, and density waves that move through the particle field like sound moves through air, periodically concentrating material into regions where the collision rate spikes. The Cassini division, the most famous gap in the rings, wide enough to contain the entire planet Earth, is largely empty because of an orbital resonance with the moon Mimas, which clears the region through repeated gravitational nudging over millions of years. What looks from Earth like a clean, elegant gap between ring structures is the visible scar of gravitational mechanics, working on debris over geological timescales. The rings are not decorative, they are a record of violence. And it gets worse, because the rings are disappearing. Not slowly in the sense of geological patience, but measurably, actively, within time frames that matter. Ring rain, scientists call it, a process by which charged particles from the rings are funneled along Saturn's magnetic field lines and fall into the planet's upper atmosphere at a rate of several tons per second, several tons per second. The rings are draining into Saturn continuously, a slow-motion disintegration driven by solar radiation, micrometeor impacts, and electromagnetic forces, and estimates based on Cassini data suggest that the main rings could be gone entirely within 100 million years. 100 million years is a long time in human terms. In solar system terms, it means the rings are young, probably formed within the last 100 million years, possibly from the breakup of a moon or the capture and tidal disruption of a comet, and that they are temporary. The image that has defined Saturn in every human mind since Galileo first pointed a telescope at it in 1610 and saw something he couldn't explain, describing Saturn as appearing to have ears. That image is a phase, an episode, a feature of the solar system that exists for a narrow window in geological time, and we happen to be alive during that window, and the window is closing. And this is where things change. Because to navigate the rings, you must first understand what Saturn itself is doing to the space around them. Saturn is the second largest planet in the solar system, 95 times the mass of Earth, And like Jupiter, it has a magnetic field of extraordinary scale, a magnetosphere that envelops the entire ring system and extends millions of miles into space. Inside this magnetosphere, charged particles are trapped and accelerated, creating radiation belts similar to Earth's Van Allen belts, but more extensive and, in certain regions near the rings and inner moons, more intense. The region between Saturn and its innermost ring, a gap only 7,000 miles wide that Cassini flew through 22 times in its final mission phase, called the Grand Finale, was found to contain particle densities and radiation levels that surprised the mission team. What appeared to be an empty gap was, electrically and magnetically, anything but. Cassini's instruments registered complex particle populations, plasma waves, and electromagnetic phenomena that challenged existing models. The gap was more active than expected. The space that looked empty was full of invisible force, full of charged particles threading along magnetic field lines, full of processes that would degrade electronics and damage biological tissue, and do so invisibly, without warning, without the courtesy of a visible threat you could navigate around. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is gravity. Not Saturn's gravity in the abstract sense, but the specific gravitational architecture of the ring system itself, and what it does to anything that tries to exist inside it for any length of time. Saturn's moons are not passive spectators of the rings. They are active participants, and their gravitational influence is constant, complex, and ruthless. The ring system is sculpted by more than 60 moons, ranging from Titan, larger than the planet Mercury, to small shepherd moons only a few kilometers across that orbit within the rings themselves, their gravity confining ring material into narrow bands by clearing the edges through repeated close passes. Pan and Daphnis, two small moons embedded within the rings, create visible wakes in the particle fields around them. Ripples of disturbed material that extend thousands of kilometers, waves in the debris carved by bodies barely large enough to be called moons, doing to the ring material what a boat hull does to water. Except the water here is moving ice and rock at orbital velocity, and the waves it forms are walls of debris that rise thousands of feet above the ring plane, temporary and unstable, collapsing back into the disk over hours and days. If you are inside the rings, when one of these density waves passes through your position, the collision probability around your hull does not increase gradually. It spikes. It spikes in the same way that driving through fog becomes driving through a wall. Not because the fog changes its nature, but because the density crosses a threshold where the statistics stop being theoretical and start being immediate. Cassini survived passage through the ring plane repeatedly because it was oriented specifically to protect its instruments. Its main antenna used as a shield against particle impacts during ring plane crossings. Its trajectory calculated and recalculated by teams of orbital mechanics who spent years modeling the ring environment to find the paths of least density. And still, during those crossings, the spacecraft registered impacts. Still, the instruments detected the tick and strike of material too small to destroy but too real to ignore, the accumulated percussion of a debris field that doesn't care about engineering excellence or mission importance, or the decade of work that went into the machine, absorbing the blows. The rings hit Cassini because the rings hit everything. They have been hitting things since they formed. They will keep hitting things until they drain away into Saturn and the planet wears them like a stain. In September 2017, Cassini's mission ended deliberately. NASA made the decision to crash the spacecraft into Saturn's atmosphere rather than risk it eventually drifting into contact with Titan or Enceladus and contaminating those potentially life-bearing moons with Earth biology. The team who had spent decades on the mission watched the final transmission in real time, knowing that the signal they were receiving had already been sent 80 minutes earlier, that by the time the data arrived, the spacecraft was already gone. Cassini hit Saturn's upper atmosphere at speeds that generated a fireball, and in that fireball, the most sophisticated machine humanity had ever sent to the outer solar system, a probe that had transformed our understanding of Saturn, that had discovered geysers on Enceladus and mapped the methane seas of Titan, that had flown between the rings and the planet and survived, was disassembled into atoms by a planet that absorbed it without registering the impact. Saturn did not notice. The rings did not pause. The shepherd moons continued their quiet sculpting of the debris. Everything continued exactly as it had before, as it had for 100 million years, as it will for 100 million more, until the last particle of ring material falls into the atmosphere, and Saturn becomes a plain, ringless gas giant, and the most beautiful object in the night sky becomes unremarkable, and the window closes, and what you are looking at right now, this luminous, lethal, temporary architecture of ice and gravity and collision, exists only in the light that has already left it, traveling toward eyes that haven't been born yet. You found Saturn's rings beautiful because you saw them from a safe distance. Through instruments designed to remove the danger and return only the image, the beauty was real. It is not a lie, but beauty and safety are not the same thing, and the rings have never pretended otherwise. They are a machine for pulverizing material into smaller and smaller pieces over time, a slow grinder running on orbital mechanics and gravity, patient and continuous and entirely indifferent to whether the material being processed is a captured comet, a shattered moon, or a spacecraft from a planet it has never heard of. They were beautiful from Earth because distance is a filter. At distance, you see the structure and lose the motion. You see the form and lose the force. You see what the rings look like and you feel something that resembles wonder. Up close, you feel something else. The universe makes beautiful things. It makes them out of violence and physics and timescales that dwarf everything human, and it does not distinguish between a process that happens to look elegant from far away and one that does not. The rings of Saturn are gorgeous because ice reflects light and geometry is pleasing to human eyes, and the scale of them triggers something in the part of your brain that reaches for meaning in large things. But they are also a debris field, a collision zone. An electromagnetically active, gravitationally sculpted, radioactively threaded, temporarily existing ring of destruction around a planet that could swallow the Earth and have room left over. Both of those things are true simultaneously. The universe does not resolve the contradiction. It never intended to. The beauty was never for you. It just happened to be visible